Hello, my name is Laura, and I would like to share with you God's story for my life. A little background is I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee. My father was a Sunday school teacher and a church deacon. My mother was a Christian. It was me and my brother and my mom and dad. When I was 6 years old, I asked my dad how to become saved, and he led me to the Lord. I asked Jesus into my heart at that time, and 1 week later, I was baptized. 2 months after that, my parents separated, and my mother was seeing someone else. And then Christmas time rolled around, and that night, my mother, her boyfriend, me, and my brother celebrated Christmas together. The boyfriend left, and we all went to bed. And then in the middle of the night, my dad broke into our home, and he ended up taking my mother's life. The boyfriend had passed my father on the street and turned around and came back, and my dad took his life as well. So effectively, my brother and I became orphans that night because we lost both of our parents as my father went off to jail. We were raised then by our guardians, and that childhood was very neglectful to us. It was as though they resented bringing us in and taking care of us. We did have psychiatric care, and we had medication for a few years. After a few years, I was no longer on the medication, so that is relevant to the rest of my story. Because I did have evil encounters and encounters with God all throughout my life. When I was saved, I believe that's when he put his seal on me, but it was many years later before I actually surrendered and gave him lordship of my life. I became a teenage pregnant young lady, I guess, because at that point, because everything I'd been through and the neglectful childhood, I was looking for love and acceptance, and I ended up doing that through relationships. This led to a relationship addiction. This type of addiction is just as debilitating and controlling as alcoholism or a drug addiction. Some people don't understand that, but it really is. And this became the impetus for becoming a story about the woman at the well. So I married the first man, and there were some evil encounters that happened during that time that I could flesh out for you if you like. And then after 2 years of abuse from him, I divorced him at the threat of my death. As I left, he said, if you leave, I will kill you. And he meant it, but I left anyway and was able to avoid him, and I got divorced. Well, the next guy I met was a former missionary, and he had been a pastor and youth pastor and a music worship leader at his church. When we dated, I had been singing solos at church. I dearly loved to sing. Well, but this man discouraged me from singing, questioning any talent that I might have. And so then I stopped singing. And for 30 years, I did not sing in church again. As you know, I sang, along with the congregation, but I didn't sing to be heard anymore. Also want to back up for just a second. During my childhood, we did go to church regularly, but I was taken to an astrologer. She read my horoscope, and she taught me how to use divining rods. And I would, sounds strange, but I would locate things that were lost with my mind. So that's a little bit of that background. So the second husband started out abusing my son. Then he turned it on me. He would become a raging maniac. When his switch was flipped, I don't know if he was possessed or just demonized, but his eyes would be completely black, and it was like staring into nothing. He couldn't comprehend anything. There was no logic. There was no talking to him. There was no recognition in his eyes. And there were attempts on my life and some pretty bad abuse. Well, there was at one time, I'll tell you about this evil encounter that I had. I saw a black, smoky, non-shape traveling very rapidly from the left side of my vision all the way through the right side of my vision. I knew it was evil, so I was able to kind of run past it and get away, and it did not follow me for some reason. But shortly after that, I had a knowing in my mind that it was almost like a voice in my mind that my husband was going to come home from his third shift job angry, and I was told in my mind to get in bed, but go to bed with my clothes on and even my shoes. That's what I did, and as a matter of fact, he did storm in a rage, and we had an altercation at that time. There were other things that happened during that time, including another evil encounter, but that was when I started hearing the voice of the Lord. Again, it wasn't audible. It was a strong knowing in my mind, that kind of in a word form, and that's the best I know how to describe it. After that, so we divorced, and because I allowed him to talk with me, he coerced me into marrying him again. We were married for 1 more year, but this I count as my second husband, so first and second. Then we go to the third one. Third one was an alcoholic, and I did not know that till after we got married. There was an evil encounter which involved a telephone that I could tell you about, and also there was a knowing voice in my head a couple of different times with regard to this time frame, as well as but I'll just move on to the next one. So we were married for 7 years and divorced. The next husband, this is husband number 4, we were married under duress. I know it sounds strange, but he had a very bad car accident, and I took care of him, and then he convinced me to marry him, even though I had said I was not going to. Well, there was a very similar telephone encounter during this time frame as well. And so all during this time, I was feeling restlessness spiritually. I didn't know what it meant. It would come and go. So then there was husband number 5, and this one was in some ways worse than any of the others. And I'm very careful when I assign labels to people, but he was a narcissist. It was confirmed by a therapist that I saw. But I actually saw another physical evil manifestation during that time that I can tell you about. But also during this time, I was attending church, and I would love to tell you about my healing experience, that the Lord healed me during a faith healing prayer time of celiac disease. There's no cure for celiac disease. He healed me from it, and I could tell you about that. After that, I never married again. This was about 6 years now after that last divorce, but the next boyfriend, I almost married him. We had the ring and everything, and this is where the most profound evil encounter happened. I'll tell you about that here. So we were asleep, we were living together, and I was lying on my right side, and my boyfriend was asleep beside me. And I felt what I thought was our cat jumping on me on my left shoulder. It was like 2 little front feet and then 2 little back feet, about the weight of a cat, I estimated. And I was still groggy, so I thought, the cat will move and I'll be able to go back to sleep. So I tried to go back to sleep, but I was not able to, because I started feeling really, really heavy, and going from the top of my head, moving all the way down to the bottom of my feet was a heavy weight. And then I opened my eyes and looked at my boyfriend, and he was sound asleep, but I wanted to reach out to him. I wanted to communicate with him to tell, hey, something's going on here. I may need your help, but I couldn't speak. Then I realized, unfortunately, that I couldn't move, so I was completely paralyzed except for my eyes. I couldn't open my mouth, I couldn't speak. And then I had trouble breathing. So then I started to get very worried and even afraid. And then at that panic mode moment, just behind my left ear, right beside my head, a male voice laughed. There was 5 different syllables, and I'll just go ahead and describe it best I can by doing it. It was kind of like you would hear at a horror movie, the evil ha 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 ha. That's how it sounded in my ear. And again, I was not on drugs, anything that would cause this type of auditory hallucination or any other kind of hallucination. This really happened. And I knew I needed to say the name of Jesus because there's power in the name of Jesus. But I couldn't speak. So I kept willing myself to say it, and I couldn't. And finally, something came out of my mouth, kind of like, "Iya." And then I kept trying, and next it was more like, "Etha." And then again, "Jesus." And finally, "Jesus, Jesus, Jesus." 3 times. After the 3rd time, that presence left. But that's when I determined I needed to leave that relationship. And it took the Lord some time to detangle it for me. But he did. This last evil man, was a deviant. He would gaslight me and coerce me into doing things that I never would have wanted to do, didn't want to do, had put boundaries up, and just every chance he had, he would find a way to cross those boundaries. It was a challenge to him. And he would take, and the more I gave, the more he would take, the more he would demand. And I was doing things that I was even repulsed by. But in any case, he finally got me out of that. So that left me, finally, at the end of my rope. I was crumpled in the floor, crying when I finally got moved out into another place. And I cried until I couldn't cry anymore. I was begging God to and I was saying out loud, praying to him constantly, why? Why did you make me this way? Why did you make me with skin on that wants to be held? And hands that want to be held, and a face that wants to be caressed, and lips that want to be kissed. If you say that your grace is sufficient for me, but you're not here, you can't hold me, you can't give me a hug, you can't be here because you're not here, you can't give me what I need. And so until I was finally exhausted, and I lay down trying to go to sleep, and in that quiet, slowly I started to feel what felt like a blanket. It was a soft, warm blanket of peace, love, acceptance, and comfort. And he held me. It held me for a few minutes. And I thanked him and I went to sleep. But I still needed his comfort. So I continued the next couple of days to cry out to him, saying the same questions. And it ended up being he hugged me those 3 times until I realized Jesus is a man. Jesus is the only man I need, and he can and does give me exactly what I need. He had been hugging me 3 times. When I realized this, my chains around my heart fell off, and I no longer had the relationship addiction. It was a journey after that of him healing me, and there was a journey of forgiveness that he took me on. I had to forgive my dad and all the people that had hurt me, and then eventually myself. And guess what? I'm singing again. I sing for the praise team at church, and I'm in the choir. I also play keyboard, and now I'm teaching. And also I started a ladies' Bible study, and the Lord has been so good to me, and I want to say how he has changed me, filled up my heart, and loved me, and now I am fulfilled and no longer have that addiction. And I just want to tell the world, so thank you so much for listening to my story.